Happy to be here with everybody else today. So my name is Michael Schimmel. I'm a senior financial advisor for Fellows Financial Group. We're a boutique financial services firm that helps you meet your goals, plain and simple. We've partnered with the United States Senate Federal Credit Union, um, coming up on 5 years now. And our only goal is to help you really achieve your individual goals, whether it's family planning, whether it's estate planning, whether it's investments for retirement, investments for businesses, tax efficiency. We're comprehensive. We're not here to provide kind of widgets. We're here to provide value, trusted value, and that is one of the core reasons we partner with the United States Senate Federal Credit Union. I wanted to start off today by just saying today's about an education on 529s. This is one avenue of kind of planning a way to fund your child's education. It's not the only way, but it's a pretty good one, depending on your situation. So today we're going to go through a number of slides. We've got a Q&A that we will probably hold back till the end of the seminar. We've got Milton, Eddie, and Andrea, watching the chat as well. So, if you have questions, throw them in the chat or the Q&A. We will definitely get to them. And I'm looking forward to going through this material with you. So, with that, I want to go to start us off and get to the next slide. So we're going to go through the types of 529s today. We're going to go through some features and benefits of each of them. We're going to go through contributions, withdrawals, and then we're going to have some Q&A. So nothing crazy, but this is to give you kind of a holistic picture of the education and where we are today with what's available. So why do we want to go to college, right? There's been a lot of noise out there that says, oh, well, maybe the 4-year degree isn't worth it. Maybe it's, maybe that dream isn't necessary. Maybe people can go other ways. And, there's a lot of credence to some of that. The trades are definitely in demand, and the amount of money that people make from the trade schools is significant. That being said, a 529 can help you pay for trade school. So that 4-year degree, that trade school, the slide on the screen, right, kind of just goes through like, what is this additional degree? What is this additional education going to provide to me in a weekly earnings bump? And so if you just looked at it from all workers, the average is $1,123, right? High school diploma is below the average of 1123. When you get the bachelor's degree, you start surpassing the national average at 1432. When you get to a professional degree, an MBA, a master's of some sort, maybe, a certified financial planner, right? That's a professional degree. You go up even more. You become a doctor in your profession. That's probably the highest point, from on an average, the median weekly earnings. So, and you can also see what correlates to having the higher education is an exact correlation to the unemployment rate. If you have a doctorate, if you have a professional degree, if you have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree, the difference in unemployment rate is significant. So is there value in going and pursuing additional education beyond high school? Absolutely. Beyond college? Absolutely. So then you get to, okay, well, the benefit is clear. Well, how do I pay for this? And education costs keep on growing. So how much has it grown? It thankfully, the inflation of education has come down a little bit. I won't say, maybe come down is the wrong word. It is slowed down. And this is the chart on the slide of like the past 10 years, public versus private. Public is orange, private is dark blue, and all institutions kind of an average is the medium blue. As you can see from 2010 to 2021, You've gone to 19,000 from around 15,000. You've gone from all education, you've gone from about 22 to 25. And on private, you've gone below 40 to now $45,000. And so this next slide actually illustrates that a little bit better, right? So this is the average tuition cost for different school types. And it's important to, think about just tuition isn't all of it, right? It's room and board, books, supplies, transportation, other college related expenses. And it's all important to note that while this cost that is up on the screen is kind of nationwide averages, it varies state by state. New York, much more expensive than Wyoming. East Coast, West Coast, more expensive than Midwest. So, depending on if you're, in college in Vermont, if you're paying out of state, in state, out of state, just tuition in Vermont, if you're paying out of state, is 43,000. Just to kind of put it in perspective, you can go to any Virginia public school for roughly $30,000 all in. So, just to kind of give you guys an idea of like, tuition is just one piece of it. And normally it is a significant piece, but the room and board, books and supplies, travel and other expenses add up to be equal or almost as much as the tuition and fees on a 4-year kind of jaunt in college. So why do we have 529s? A 529 was established by Congress. It's in the IRS code. It's code 5.29, which is where the 529 came from. And it's a tax advantage plan, and it's a savings vehicle designed to help save for future expenses for a specific beneficiary. That beneficiary can be your children, it can be relatives, it can be nieces, nephews, it can actually be anybody you really want it to be. You, as the owner of the 529, can change the beneficiary at any time. And the tax advantages are great. You can put in today's dollars, and that money can grow. Say you have a newborn and they're not going to go to school for another 18 years. You could put in that money for 18 years and allow that to grow tax deferred. And then they get accepted to college, and they're allowed at that point to start taking the money out of that 529, you as the owner, to pay for their qualified education. And that maybe you started and you put $10,000 in or 15,000, and now it's worth 55,000. Well, all of that money is tax-free as long as you're using it for a qualified education expense. So the 529s can be a pretty powerful vehicle to pay for higher education or just plain simply education expenses. We'll get to it, but there's been a lot of enhancements to the 529 programs. Most recently, the latest enhancements came from the Secure Act 2.0. So we're going to get more into the concept of 529s. There's two types of plans. You don't see this one type very often anymore, but you do see 529s in regards to college savings plans. So the next plan is prepaid tuition. So prepaid tuition, basically, state of Virginia used to have prepaid tuition for Virginia colleges. They do not anymore. If you got into the plan, that's still honored, but they don't offer it anymore. And what it basically is you're buying today's education costs today, now, even though your son or daughter or niece, nephew, whoever the 529 or the prepaid plan was for, they might not be going there for 15 years, but you're locking in today's tuition, and you can pay it over time. The nice thing is you do not have inflation creep with your tuition costs. Unfortunately, prepaid tuition plans, have largely gone away for most public universities. There are some private universities that still do prepaid tuition plans, but there are fewer and fewer as the years go on, because the cost of tuition and books and all the other pieces that make up an education experience have really become really hard to decide on, and plan for. And so the states and these universities were giving up too much, and their costs kept escalating over the years from various types of inflation. College savings plans, on the other hand, are investment accounts that let you save for education expenses. The funds can be used for a wider range of educational expenses in institutions, including tuition, board, room, board, books, etc. So there are two. However, the college savings plan, the 529, is the more popular one and the one that's more readily available across the United States. So what are some features of a 529? First off, every state has a 529 plan. You do not have to live in that state or go to school in that state to use that 529 plan. So you can have a Virginia 529 plan, live in Florida, and go to school in Texas. That's fine. There are some tax advantages to doing a 529 at times in your state that you live in. But overall, 529s offer a very flexible use of funds. So you can pay for expenses, tuition, room, board, books, computer. You can pay for K through 12 education, private schools. That was an enhancement made a number of years ago. Most 529s have a very high contribution limit, which allows us to save substantially for education. So a lot of grandparents or people that have higher means might put in a lump sum, $50,000 to start when somebody's born, and then never make another contribution. And the rule of 72 says every 7 years at 7.2%, your balance will double. So if you wait till 21 to take out any money, so maybe you take loans the first 2 years, you can then think that 50,000 should be tripled by the time they're 21. The other nice thing about 529s is it's not a whole lot of effort once you get them set up. Once you get them set up and running, they're easy to manage. You can manage them with an advisor. Virginia's got an advisor-led program, for example, or they have a self-directed plan, Virginia 529 Best. Control and ownership. The nice thing about 529s, you're not putting this money in a bucket that can never be accessed somewhere else. You could retain ownership as the parent or the individual that opens the 529. If that beneficiary got a full ride, maybe somewhere else, you can change it to maybe their sibling who didn't get it. You've got a lot of flexibility. As long as you can keep changing the ownership as much as you want till the funds are exhausted. So overall, 529s are popular because it gives people flexibility. It gives them the ability to have market growth, tax deferral, and really tax advantage, access to the money as long as it's used for an education purpose. So, every year the 529s, or every few years, 529 plans have been getting looks at from the IRS and regulations, and they've largely been improved. But before you, just kind of make the leap, you always want to make sure that, is this going to fit with your plan? Consult a tax advisor, consult a financial professional to really understand how the benefits of a 529 could impact you individually and comply with all the resident and federal tax laws. So some of the tax benefits, we already kind of alluded to them, right? But first and foremost, tax-free growth. You put the money in today till you take it out, it grows tax-free. It doesn't mean that you won't owe federal, state, or federal taxes on this, but as long as you use it for a qualified education expense, you will get the growth tax-free and you will not pay any taxes on that. You also could possibly get a federal income tax deduction. Well, no, you're not going to get a federal tax deduction for making the contribution to a 529. However, you could get a state income tax deduction or credit. Many states, Virginia, Maryland, DC, offer state tax deductions or credits for contributions made to their state's 529, which is what I alluded to in the beginning. Texas, for example, does not give any state deduction. They don't have a state income tax, so they don't provide any tax incentive to use their plan. A lot of people in Texas will use other plans just because there's no real advantage. So they choose the plan that with the state that they believe is best. A lot of people use 529s for estate planning or gift tax. So gift tax, contributions to a 529 are basically considered gifts for tax purposes. In the US, you can contribute up to the annual gift exclusion rate without incurring a gift tax. This allows for substantial contributions without, triggering a gift tax. The gift tax on an annual basis is roughly 14 million, I think, today. It keeps adjusting a little bit for inflation. Your exemption for gift is $12.2 million from a gift tax perspective. So you've got substantial room to put in significant money into a 529 if you wanted. It can also, that room allows you to help provide and lower your estate. And by contributing to a 529, it reduces your taxable estate, decreasing your liability from a tax perspective, and protects that money for growth, and it can be used for future educational purposes. So as always, consult an advisor, an accountant, financial professional to help you make those decisions. But overall, the tax benefits of a 529 can be quite powerful. So what happens when you open a 529? Well, there's an owner, there's an account owner, there's a beneficiary, there's authorized users, there's a successor owner, there's a financial advisor or custodian, normally part of it, and there could be a trust or an entity. So let's talk about those a little bit more in detail. The account owner is the person that opens the account, manages the 529. They are in charge. There is one single owner of every 529. If it's a parents, it's one parent. It's not both parents, but it is one person with one beneficiary. The beneficiary can be any person whom the funds for the 529 are intended or used for a qualified expense. The beneficiary can be the account holder themselves. So I could open a 529 and the beneficiary could be myself. It can be another family member, a friend. As long as the beneficiary meets the plan's eligibility criteria, they can be the beneficiary. Now, parents, you can't be jointly on as the account owner, but there is something called a successor owner. Normally, one of the parents will open it up, and then the other parent will be the successor owner if something happens to you. They don't have primary control, but they do allow you maybe to have some level of visibility. It depends state by state. Then there's the financial advisor or custodian. So in Virginia, there's a Virginia 529 plan through College America that's advisor-led. That would be where you engage somebody like myself or a financial professional to help set up the 529 and talk through the ins and the outs of the 529, the investment options, and best strategies to utilize it for your goals. You can also, talk to your CPA. They might be able to help. However, they're not going to be able to help set it up. The account owner is still, no matter what, the primary decision maker of the 529. Lastly, trust or entity. You don't see this a lot, but it is possible to establish a 529 within a trust or part of a legal entity. In such case, the trustees would be the representative being responsible for managing the plan. This is possible. It is more used from a legacy perspective to create, we've seen people create basically a private endowment within a 529 plan that funds generations of children's educations because of how they funded it. And it's owned, it's a trust is the ownership, and the trustee kind of helps manage that throughout the years. So you always want to look at kind of what is the best way to open the 529 and how are you planning on using this 529. So who can contribute to a 529? Virtually anybody. So parents, grandparents, relatives, there are no income restrictions. So if you have parents, grandparents, or relatives that are high income earners, they can contribute. If you're a high income earner, you can contribute. There are no income restrictions on funding a 529. Contribution limits. There is a maximum annual contribution. Normally it's above $250,000. There is a $1 million lifetime contribution limit. Most people don't hit those or come close unless they're using it for creating kind of legacy gifts with a trust or something of that nature. How to contribute. So you can contribute with a lump sum, one-off, one time and never contribute again. You can contribute monthly, weekly, or just kind of randomly as you want. People that are successful in utilizing 529s normally contribute on a bi-monthly or monthly basis as soon as the person who they want to plan for is born and basically has a social security number. At that point, you can create a 529. And if you're unsure, obviously ask a financial, professional, consult with the administrator of the plan, for guidance that's tailored to your situation. So before we look at this, all right. So where do we go from, we've spent our years putting money into the 529, and now we're gotten to the point where, okay, now it's time to use money. So how do we use it? What can we use it for? So the first and foremost is it has to be an accredited, a qualified expense. Qualified expenses, if you want to take just a very broad stroke, is anything that flows through the bursar office at a college can be considered a qualified expense. Room and board, if it's through the university, can be deducted. Books, supplies, computers, technology. Travel does not get included, right? To and from the college, university, if there is a requirement to travel for the school, that could be, you just want to be careful about that. Who can be eligible, right? What institutions are eligible? Well, they have to be accredited colleges or university. They have to be an accredited vocational school. Some international schools will qualify. You always want to make sure before you assume that you can use the funds, you want to make sure that they are an eligible institution. You can always refer to the IRS code or talk to your trusted financial advisor professional to ensure that. The payment process, how does it work? Well, you can have payments directly paid to the institution for the expenses. You can make the payment and then the 529 can reimburse you for qualified expenses. What you do want to do, no matter what, is keep all the receipts and documentation to support your distribution requests. And then the other thing you want to keep in mind is timing. Plan ahead for those distributions. You want to avoid penalties by using the funds for qualified expenses. Check and double check. Non-qualified expenses, this is where you can get in trouble. Like if you paid for something that was not qualified, you have to pay the taxes on the money that has been gained, and you have to pay a 10% penalty. We don't, nobody wants that to happen. It flies in the face of what you're trying to do. So you always want to make sure you are not paying for non-qualified. And just remember that any non-qualified withdrawals will be subject to income tax. So really important not to be using a 529 for non-qualified expenses. We alluded to this a little bit, but every state almost has their own 529. Virginia has one, Maryland has one, DC has one, Texas has one. I mean, almost every single state has a 529. Every state 529 plan is different. Different plans offer different investment options. Sometimes states will have an advisor-led program. Sometimes states will not have an advisor-led program. Why would somebody want an advisor-led program? Hey, we know we need to do this, but we have no idea on investments. We want help and guidance choosing the investments and talking about the strategies of how we want to grow this money. When you are choosing to be in a state-specific plan, the state income tax code in a lot of states offers you a tax break. A lot of times, so you used to have to, Virginia, for example, you used to have to open, every child would get, and this is the old dollar amount, but just for simple math, every child you opened a 5294 for, you got a $2,000 deduction on your state income tax income. So if you have 3 kids, you could open actually 6 of them, and you would now get $12,000 off of your state income tax. Nowadays, states have gotten wise, and it just made too many 529 accounts being out there. They just give you a flat number per child, and they grossed it up to make up for, hey, one parent might do it or might do it in both parents. So instead, now Virginia is per child, it's a higher dollar amount, plain and simple. So you don't have to open 6 accounts for 3 kids. You can just open 3 accounts for 3 kids if you want. Hopefully I didn't lose anybody. We can always run back through that again. But why would you choose a different state? So I alluded to this. I'll pick on Texas a little bit. Texas doesn't have a state income tax. Neither does Florida, right? So neither of them give you, there's no state tax advantage, and there's no federal state tax advantage. So people in Florida and Texas may want to just use a different 529 plan in another state because they like the investment lineup better, or they like, and that's pretty much the only reason why they would choose a different, maybe the fee structure in the investment lineup is more palatable to, individuals. So you want to choose a plan, though, that goes and kind of coincides with your state if you can, if you do get a tax advantage. There's that tax advantage is meaningful, especially the more dollars you're able to put into it and maximize the state tax deduction. So it is wise to use your state plan if there is a tax advantage. However, occasionally it does make sense to look outside and have different states. If grandparents want to open a 529, I would do it in their home state. You can still have your own 529 for your oldest son, and they can have one for your oldest son. There's no harm in having multiple 529s owned by different people, all having the same beneficiary. But why not have them all get the tax benefit from the states where where the owners are living? So that's kind of stuff of state specific 529 information. Going on, why, we've kind of gone through this. Why would we look at out of state? Better investment options, better performance, no in-state tax benefits, Florida, Texas, no residency requirement. Most states do not have a residency requirement. Every state has interstate portability. Some states might have a unique feature. I'm not aware of any states that have such features that just scream, hey, come here and do a 529. Most of them are generally the same. So where do we go from here, right? So, okay, we decide we want to open our 529. We're going to do it in our state, or we're going to pick a different state. How do we maximize? What are some tips to maximize a 529? So start early. Earlier on, I said, as soon as they get their social security number, you can start a 529. Starting early is one of the best and most effective strategies to having a successful 529. The power of compound interest is far and beyond one of the most powerful ways to make more money and boost your savings over time. Like I said, the rule of 72 is every 10 years, if you're making a roughly 7.2% return, your money doubles. So by the time they're 21, 50,000 turns into 150,000. And that's all, that extra 100,000 that you made is all tax-free, as long as you're using it for a qualified education expense. Regular contributions, we talked about this, setting up automatic contributions, bi-weekly, bi-monthly, semi-annual can really help you be successful. And anybody that sets up automatic contributions has a more likelihood of being successful in getting to the result that they're looking for. Take advantage of the tax benefits. State tax, right? 529s offer tax advantages, tax-free growth, tax-free withdrawals for qualified education expenses. And there may be some other state-specific ones that you might want to investigate if available to you. All right, this one's relatively new, but sometimes employers will have education and benefits. Some employers offer college savings benefits and matching contributions to 529s. Double check with HR to take advantage of these and see if they're available to you. Gifts, family, friends, birthdays. Encourage grandparents, relatives, friends to contribute to their 529. Special occasions, birthdays, holidays. It's a good way to do it. Show your kids, hey, Aunt Susie gave you this money. We're going to put it over here, and it'll help you later on for school. Explain the power of what the 529 will do. Invest strategically. All 529s have various investment vehicles that you can choose from. You want to choose investment options that align with your risk tolerance and your time horizon. There are 529 plans that offer wide ranges from conservative to aggressive. So it just kind of depends as your needs for the portfolio and the age of that beneficiary changes, you might want to be altering that over time. And then the other thing is don't stop saving after enrollment. This is one that doesn't get a lot of attention, but your child goes away at 18. You still have 4 more years that you can put in money, take state tax help, right, from a tax break, and contribute that money over those 4 years to potentially grow a little bit more and be accessed tax-free later in life. So I would recommend, just because they're 18 and you got to start using it, doesn't mean you can't keep contributing to it at all. So we've had a lot of updates nearly to the 529s over the years. Some of the latest happened just with the Secure Act 2.0. So 529s can now be used to pay down student loans. So according to the Secure Act 1.0, which became law in December 2019, families can use 529 savings plans to repay up to $10,000 in qualified student loans. These loans can be owned by the student or their siblings. This means there's greater flexibility for using 529s. Another thing passed in 2018 was you used to not be able to use it K through 12. Well, you can. So you can use up to $10,000 per student per year to cover K through 12 tuition incurred at a public, private, or religious elementary or secondary school. So unfortunately, if your tuition is $15,000, well, you can only use $10,000 from your 529. Changes to grandparent rules. So back, and this happened in 2024, Secure Act, the Consolidated Appropriations Act in 2021. So basically the FAFSA, which is the streamlined pre-application for federal student aid. It's a form that most colleges use for scholarship, determining students' financial packages, needs, etc. So the simplification went into effect that basically if a grandparent has a 529, it will no longer penalize you as a child and parents of the child that you have additional funds for use. Before this went into effect, grandparents' assets actually hurt a person's chance for determining financial aid packages. So that's no longer there. The newest thing, which is probably, I think, one of the coolest ones, is 529s that maybe you weren't used. Maybe you got a partial scholarship, or maybe you went to different school, or maybe it just grew more than you needed. You're allowed to roll over up to $35,000 of a 529 into a Roth IRA for that beneficiary. You can't do it all at once. It needs to be done on the annual limit each year, but you can put up to $35,000 into a Roth, which means money that you put in at when they're 1 and grew, and maybe they didn't use the money, as long as it's been in place for 15 years, they're allowed to move 35,000 of it into a Roth ultimately and never have to pay taxes on that money ever again, which is quite powerful. The other thing kind of Secure Act 2.0 allowed for was qualified rollover contributions, Roth contributions. These conversions allow from traditional IRA to Roth IRA and attributable earnings. So once the, Roth conversions of a qualified 529, right? We're talking 15 years, 35,000. It's the contributions limits, right, are still there, right? So this year it's 7,000 or 7,500. The income limits, so it doesn't matter if that beneficiary is making more than what would be allowed technically for a Roth contribution, they don't apply here. However, the Roth IRA early distribution rules do apply just as normal. But this is a great option. I can't stress that enough, and it gives people a lot of. I would say it takes a lot of anxiety away from, well, what if I don't use it all? Worry away from, creating a 529. Okay, there we go. So another way you can save for education is, if you didn't want to do a 529, is a Coverdell education savings account. ESAs, they're popularly known as, or Coverdell accounts, is another type of tax advantage higher education savings options. So funds that are saved in this type of account can be used for elementary, secondary expenses, in addition to higher education expenses. That said, everybody's not eligible to contribute to these. There is an income limit, unlike 529s. For example, individuals, if you make more than adjusted gross income of 100,000, 110,000 with an income cap of 220 for couples, you can't make, and you can only put $2,000 in here. So now you might say, well, $2,000 isn't much, but $2,000 every year till they're 18 is just short of, 20 grand. You're at 16 grand or 18, excuse me, just short of 40 grand. So still, that could pay for 1 year fully of education expenses at a state college in Virginia, for example. So one thing to specifically note, though, is the money in these accounts need to be liquidated before the beneficiary turns 30. So unlike a 529 that can basically stay in existence in perpetuity, ESAs cannot. They have to be used before the person turns 30, or they must be rolled over to another ESA for another family member. I have a lot of clients that will do a little bit of both because they are trying to pay for high school, middle school, and private or educational, Catholic school or something of that nature. So they'll do a little bit of both because there's a $10,000 limit from 529s, but then there's no limit in using this other than just the amount that you can put in. So this is a good kind of ancillary thing you can do on a 529 on top of a 529 if you're going to be specifically using some of the funds for funding high school or maybe middle school or even K through, middle grammar school. A little bit more on ESA contributions. So they're made in cash, they're not deductible. You got to be below an income limit. Must be contributed by the tax return due date without an extension, which is April. And the max is $2,000 per beneficiary across all accounts. So just to keep that in mind. Distributions, any of the growth is tax-free as long as it's qualified, just like a 529. Funds must be dispersed within 30 days of 30 years old. Family transfers are allowed. So all good things. It still offers a lot of flexibility. You just the main things are be underneath the income limit, and then, you can't put anything more than 20 or 2,000. The last thing, or one of the last things that you can do for saving for college is a custodial account. They're known by UGMAs or UTMAs, UTMAs account, depending on the state. So these are opened by parents to save for their dependents. The accounts transfer to the child once they reach 18 or 21, depends on the state and where you live. So with this type of account, parents can contribute funds in the amounts of up to the gift tax exclusion rate, which we talked about earlier. And then that money can be invested on behalf of their dependent. So this type of college savings plan, no income limits, anybody can contribute up to the annual gift exclusion amount. So you can funds in this account can be invested for the maximum growth. You can take the most risk. Anybody can contribute. Funds can be used to pay for anything, not just specific for higher education. There are some contribution caps, but they're quite high. Obviously, there's fees if it's an investment account, and taxes do apply to withdrawals. So why would somebody do this? Is you've got the ability to put money away, get it out of your estate, and have it designated for your children, and it'll grow. However, when they access the money will be subject to taxes. The last place, or one of the last places, is Roth IRAs. As an advisor, I think there's various other ways that are probably better than using your Roth IRA. But you can use a Roth IRA and save for college on an after-tax basis with a Roth IRA. You can put your money in, grow it. Say you put in, up to $7,000, which is the 2024 limit. If you did $7,000 for the next 20 years, you've got $140,000 in there. Maybe it grew to 240,000. Well, the 140,000 can be pulled back out, and that's your basis. You've already paid taxes on that, and that could then go and pay for college education for your children. The rest of the money needs to stay in your Roth IRA, and that has allowed you to utilize your funds for your retirement, but also have flexibility to use them for any other purpose that you want. There's no limitation on how the funds can be used, so you don't have to worry if it's a qualified education expense or not. Annual contributions do apply. That's $7,000 for 2024, or $8,000 for catch-up, and income limits do apply for Roth IRA contributions. So is this a way to potentially have cash for your children without limits, without restrictions? Yes, I would argue there's maybe some better ways depending on the situation, but this is one to be considered for sure. The last one that I wanted to talk about is just a traditional brokerage account. Offers the most flexibility. There's no caps. You have total control of your investments. You can withdraw the reasons for any reason. Problem is, short-term or long-term capital gains will apply to that. It will apply to the owner of the account, and there's no tax advantages of this. What you're doing is basically investing for the future, but you don't have any tax advantages. So it really comes down to, what is your financial situation? What are the goals? How are you going to fund this? And what type of restrictions do you want or don't you want on this? So this little chart, kind of is helpful. I find, there's definitely different ways that you can save, and we've gone through a number of them today, from Roth IRAs to 529s to Coverdales to UTMAs to just regular brokerage account. What I would say, though, across all of these is starting today is more powerful than starting next week, next year, a few years down the road. Starting today will make a much bigger impact than if you start 3 years from now, when you can put in double the money. Starting early with the compound interest is very powerful. And I would implore anybody who wants to save for education, the earlier the better. So what happens, right? I get this a lot. What happens if my child doesn't go to school, or a school where I have a qualified education expense? So on a 529, you can change the beneficiary. As long as the new beneficiary is a family member, the money can be used as a qualified education expense without incurring income taxes or penalties. You can always cash out your 529, but you have to pay federal income tax plus a 10% penalty. So there is a finesse in regards to putting the right amount of money in to a 529. What helps reduce the amount of finesse needed is this now Secure Act 2.0, where you can roll over 35,000. That is powerful. And it takes a lot of fear of like, oh, I'm going to have extra money out there. Coverdell education expenses. If the child doesn't go to college, they don't use the money by the time they're 30, the money gets distributed and it's taxed on the amount, pure and simple. Brokerage accounts, doesn't matter if the child goes to school or not. You can use the money for any other purpose: down payment, a house, wedding, retirement, a car. Really doesn't matter. You get to choose. So here's some resources in regards to understanding all your college savings options. FAFSA, U.S. Department of Education, Federal Student Aid website, IRS website, Saving for College, College Investor, College Savings Plan Network, North American Securities Administration, the Senate Federal Credit Union. They have a copy of this deck in a PDF format. If you wanted this, I'm happy to meet with anybody who has questions on this and run through kind of how we could, what the best setup is for you and kind of how to proceed. And with that, I'm gonna open it up for Q&A. I know we've had a number of things in the chat and also in the Q&A. So wanted to go from either Eddie, Milton, or Andrea. Where do we want to go from here?
Hi,
Hey.
so I'll be asking the questions today. So the first question we have is, can the funds be used for colleges outside of the United States? My grandchildren live in London and Berlin.
So the answer to that is it depends. It depends on the actual university, in London or in Berlin, if they're considered an accredited university. And if so, you would just want to double check with the state plan that you already are using to verify that that specific university is considered an acceptable education expense.
Thank you. The next question is, can college freshmen have a 529 setup for them?
Absolutely. The main advantage would be you put money in today and maybe use it your senior year, and maybe you have 3 years of growth. The other thing you get if you're doing it, even as a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, your state may offer you a small state tax advantage. So you save a little bit on state taxes and maybe you get some interest that grows. Right now interest, you can probably get 5-6% on interest on that fund. So it's not a bad idea still. But again, the dollar amount is where kind of it would really matter.
Got it. Thank you. Another question is, what is a good approach to set up a 529s for a military family? For example, I have my post 9/11 GI Bill divided in 1/3 for my 3 kids, ages 7, 5, and 2. State of will either be Virginia or Florida.
Yeah, so I'm not I wouldn't say I'm an expert on the GI Bill for education uses, but my recollection is you have it divided by 3, so it'll cover 1/3 of their education each. And if that is the case, it really doesn't matter where you open it. I would say wherever you're stationed right now, you would open, you could open 3 different 529s for each child, or excuse me, 1 529 for each. So you'd have 3. And if you live in Virginia, you get a Virginia state tax deduction for opening it up. Really, if the GI Bill is going to cover a majority of the education, well, that's perfect. You can use it as long as you're not over 35,000. and it's in existence for 15 years, you can roll it into a Roth for them. So the money's not going to waste. Or maybe your oldest doesn't go to college, but your next two do. You can change the ownership of the one for your oldest to the other two kids, or one of them. So you've got some flexibility in that. I wouldn't say it's a bad idea, even with the GI Bill, unless you had a GI Bill that covers everything.
Another question is, what are your thoughts about going with a state 529 with pretty modest tax benefits like DC versus going with another state's 529 plan that has lower fees / higher returns?
Yeah, so I would just say, you got to do the money, do the example. It's Virginia state income tax, 6%. Okay, 6%. You got three kids, it saves you 14,000. So, if I just did kind of a quick, back of the napkin math, $16,000, times 6%. That's wrong. 6%. Saves you $960 in tax. So is that $960 saved in tax in Virginia more valuable versus, I'm just picking on Virginia because I live in Virginia, more valuable than I'm going to the plan in Idaho because I like the investment options better and the costs are lower. You kind of would have to do it depends. How much money am I going to be putting into this? What are the expenses to really make that cash benefit analysis? The no-brainer is like Texas, Virginia, or Texas and Florida. There's no state income tax. There's really no incentive to be in their plan. So you just want to pick the best plan.
Thank you. Another question is, can you elaborate on growth is tax-free bullet? Is it the initial contribution tax, and when does that happen in the process?
Yeah, so any contributions to a 529 is after tax dollars. So you've already been taxed on the money. It is what makes it very powerful is the money. So say you start a 529 when your child's born or one, for the next 17 years, all that money is growing tax-free. And then if you use it for qualified education, it's tax exempt, right? You're not paying any taxes on any money ever that's taken out of it, as long as it's used for qualified education. On the 529 side, where it can be kind of tax-free bullet, is you can put a substantial amount of money in there, or three different ones, and you can change the ownership at any time. You can change the beneficiaries at any time. So if a family treats the 529 correctly, it could last for generations. And so I don't know if that's what you're referring to, tax-free bullet, but it is after tax dollars that initially go into a 529 and then grow tax deferred. And if access for an qualified education expense are tax free without any penalties.
A user asked if you could talk about the definition of the authorized user because they missed it.
Yeah, so every state's a little bit different in regards to the 529 application. So in Virginia, there's a successor owner, not user, authorized user. Really, if something happens to the primary owner of the 529, they become the owner and can access all the information. Other states will have an authorized user that allows people to view the account balances, but not make any changes and things of that nature. So it's state specific on what features kind of they allow and don't allow.
Thank you. Another question is, should a family with 3 children set up 3 529 plans or one plan for all 3 kids to use, since the owner can change beneficiaries?
I would say to get the maximum tax advantage, you would set up 3. If you're like, it's not worth it. If the ages are spread out a decent amount, I'd say 1 or 2 probably makes sense. But normally people will open one up for each child unless there's at least a 4-year difference, and you don't think that other, the person that's oldest is going to keep going on to get a master's or a doctorate, because you're not going to change it most likely. So you got to take that into consideration.
Can 529 conduct fundraising activities like bake sale, etc.? Bake sales.
I I've never heard that one before. I would imagine so. Anybody can contribute to a 529. So if people want to do a bake sale to raise money, and that money then gets deposited into the 529, that's your prerogative. But yeah, I don't. The 529 itself isn't going to be conducting the fundraising. It's, the individuals, and then they're just taking that money and putting it into the 529.
We moved from DC to Virginia last year. From a tax perspective, should we consider opening a Virginia 529 plan for our 2 children, or just keep the DC 529 plans we already have set up?
And if the tax advantage is important to you, I don't know how many kids they have, and it's not a bad thing. The Virginia plan, I mean, as I alluded to, I live in Virginia. The Virginia plan is a great plan, and you'll get the upfront tax advantage. There's no harm in having DC plans and Virginia plans. I don't know any state tax benefits from California. You have to go
Yeah,
consult your tax advisor or look up the state tax code.
that was the next
Sorry.
question.
Yep.
Can I own 529 plan for the benefit of my niece and nephew, 1 per child?
Yes. So yeah, you as a grandparent can open up 15 529s for every niece and nephew that you have, if you have 15.
Um, one of the viewers today did jump off a call or the webinar. And Eddie, if you could remember to, thanks. Can you please show the previous slide for one of the viewers?
I don't know which slide that was.
I think it was
Maybe this one. It was at 352. So
Yeah, I believe so. And I think with that being said, Michael, I think that probably was the last question that came through. And we want to take this time to thank you for taking time and coming in and providing so much great information for anyone that that have little ones. And as Michael alluded to, today is the day to start that 529 plan if you haven't started yet. Do not wait until next week or next year. There's so much that you can benefit from setting up either a 529 or perhaps exploring some of the other options. If you want a more detailed information, as Michael alluded to, we do have this partnership. We can set up an appointment with you so you can talk in person with Michael. Here's his contact information as well on the screen. So if you want to reach out to him, you're more than welcome to do so. Or you can go to the website for our website, ussfcu.org/FAS. And then we can actually see Michael's calendar there on the website, and you can select your own appointment if needed. But if not, again, we always love to engage with you. So if you want to reach out to us directly, and we can make that connection with Michael for you on your behalf, we can also do that too. So Michael, thank you so much. Hold on, before I go, I think I just saw a couple of more questions. But also don't forget that for anyone that was not able to stay all the way through the end of this presentation, we will have this recording available hopefully by the end of the week. So we will be more than happy to share, to send you guys to the link so you can watch the video again. Also, we are going to send a copy of this presentation with all the details that Michael went over. So with that being said, I don't think there's any more questions. Michael, do you see anything else by any chance?
no,
Right.
the last two I just answered, I believe, on through text. So if they have more questions, my contact information is on the last slide right here. And as you alluded to, my information's on the credit union's website. you can book an appointment. We can call or have a Teams meeting or meet in person, virtually or somewhere. So thank you everyone for your time today and joining us a little earlier than the normal 6 p.m. I appreciated it, and I look forward to hopefully connecting with some of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. And also don't forget, next week we have Path to Home Ownership, unlocking the door to your new home. We're back to a normal time at 6 p.m. But I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your week. We'll see you guys next week.